Reality is such that frequencies have a much more profound effect on us than we've been previously led to believe. This basic fundamental fact can no longer be ignored. As technologically advanced as we're constantly told we are these days, there are some technologies that are just now being presented to the public as new when they're not new at all, but have simply been widely suppressed for decades. Things like the new digital neuro headbands that pulse specific electromagnetic frequencies into a person's head to change people's moods, for example. People are buying these now. This is a thing. But it was proven that that type of technology worked decades ago. It has also come out in recent years that frequencies can cure diseases, including cancer. Professor Anthony Holland even gave a TED Talk called Shattering Cancer with Resonant Frequencies a couple years back, where he discussed that specific oscillating pulse electrical fields can destroy everything from cancer cells to MRSA.
Over the course of 15 months, we try hundreds and hundreds of frequencies, if not thousands, until we find the magic combination. The answer is you have to have two input frequencies, one low, one high, and the higher frequency must be 11 times the lower. It's what we musicians would call the 11th harmonic. And when we add the 11th harmonic, we begin to shatter microorganisms like a crystal glass.
Not that you probably heard about it on the nightly news or anything. As someone pointed out in the comments on his video, phrases like "they hadn't seen anything like it and it seems to be a new phenomenon" made viewers who know about the organized suppression of such technologies since at least the 1930s want to slam their own heads into a wall. If you haven't heard of Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, this is someone who's been referred to by those who personally knew him as a genius. He was a scientist and inventor, and starting in the 20s, he began building a large and very complex microscope capable of magnifying objects 31,000 times, compared with the maybe 1,700 times that were available on standard microscopes in the 30s and 40s. By 1940, he had invented a 2-foot microscope weighing 200 pounds that included 5,682 parts, which enabled him to see viruses and bacteria in a way that no other scientist had at that time. Because these organisms were so tiny, he designed a method of staining them with light. And through this work, he came to understand that living things, including pathogens and viruses and bacteria, have their own frequency or oscillation pattern. And just like a specific musical note can shatter a wine glass if sung at the resonant frequency of the glass, he found specific frequencies could be used when matched up with specific pathogens in order to destroy them. And as he continued to isolate viruses and bacteria and locate their frequencies, he also claimed he discovered the virus responsible for cancer. Using resonance, or what he termed the mortal oscillatory rate of the virus, he was able to kill it in laboratory experiments over and over and over. He completed hundreds of experiments on tumors in rats purposefully infected with the isolated cancer virus before ever attempting to use these frequencies on people. In 1934, he famously tested out his device on 16 terminally ill cancer patients. Out of 16, 14 of them, all but 2, were certified medically cured in just 3 months. Of his treatment, Rife would later write, "With the frequency instrument treatment, no tissue is destroyed, no pain is felt, no noise is audible, and no sensation is noticed. A tube lights up and 3 minutes later the treatment's completed. The virus or bacteria is destroyed, and the body then recovers itself naturally from the toxic effect of the virus or bacteria. Several diseases may be treated simultaneously." His findings were at first widely published. In June of 1940, the LA Times reported, "For organisms too small to be stained, an ingenious illuminating system is used. The system utilizes Rife's theory that organisms respond to certain wavelengths, a theory he carries to finality by bombarding disease germs with radio waves which are tuned to those of the minute man-killers. And the virus he says occurs in cancer has, Rife insists, disintegrated under such radio waves." Rife was hailed in the scientific and medical communities for his discoveries, at first. By 1937, he'd established a company called Beamray with several colleagues, and 14 of his machines were manufactured. Multiple doctors used these machines, tested them out, and saw that they worked. It wasn't just Reif's word. So what happened? Why aren't these machines in every hospital and cancer treatment center in the world today? Why don't we have them? Simply put, the only cancer Reif couldn't seem to kill was greed. Powerful opposition with vested interests in allopathic, that is, the pharmaceutical and surgery-based medicine system, and the still infant cancer treatment called chemotherapy, and medical professionals linked to the Rockefeller Foundation with its deeply entrenched eugenics-based population control agenda, would make absolutely sure that Reif's machines would never be available to the public at large.
If you notice an absence of stethoscopes, thermometers, and other medical paraphernalia, don't let it upset you. This doctor doesn't go in for them. He's got something better. She doesn't even have to undress. The machine will find out what's wrong. The modern counterpart of the ancient medicine man. He's traded in his boar's tooth and magic wand for an electrical appliance. But his stock in trade is still ignorance and superstition. The 20th century witch doctor talks in terms of atomic rays and supersonic vibrations. He's what's generally referred to as a quack doctor. But somehow that term just doesn't cover my feelings on the subject. To me, the term murderer is much more appropriate.
One such big pharma stooge was Dr. Morris Fishbane, head for a time of the American Medical Association, and described by Bob Wallace on LouRockwell.com as a shakedown artist hell-bent on destroying naturopathic medical inventors he couldn't buy out. The story goes that Fishbane sent an attorney to make a token attempt to buy out Reif, and Reif refused. And although no one knows the exact terms of the offer, it was probably similar to the one Fishbane made to Harry Hoxsey for his herbal cancer remedy, which Fishbane later had to admit in court worked on skin cancer.
On a television screen, it must look very much like a jar of chocolate syrup. It's not. It's cancer salve, and it's deadly. If it's killed before, it'll kill again. When it doesn't kill, it maims. It never cures.
Fishbane and his associates would receive all the profits for 9 years, and Hoxsey would receive nothing. Then if they were satisfied it worked, Hoxsey would begin to get 10% profits. When Hoxsey refused, Fishbane and his political mafia went after him, and they had Hoxsey arrested 125 times in a period of just 16 months. The charges were always based on practicing without a license, and they were always thrown out in court, but Fishbane ended up harassing this Hoxsey guy for 25 years this way. The only good thing that came out of any of it is that the scandal ultimately forced Fishbane to resign. Fishbane also offered Phil Hoyland, who was an investor in Reif's Beam Ray company and an electrical engineer who helped build the frequency machines, legal assistance, basically in an attempt to steal the company out from under Reif and the other investors. And in 1939, a lawsuit ensued. And that was the beginning of the end of Reif and his machines. Unable to withstand the criticisms and attacks on his character and his life's work in court, Reif crumbled and turned to alcoholism, despite the fact that he ultimately won his case. But the legal costs bankrupted him, and Beam Ray went out of business. And Fishbane continued to wield all the power of the AMA to halt any further proper scientific investigation into Reif's claims or his machines. Doctors that had previously supported Reif suddenly fell silent. One of his partners, Arthur Kindle, all of a sudden retired to Mexico after receiving a magical gift of $250,000 from guess who. Other doctors were given large grants and AMA honors to keep their mouths shut and go back to prescribing pharmaceuticals. Major medical journals, which are all predominantly funded by big pharma advertising revenues, refused to publish anyone's work involving Reif's theories or his machines or any of it. And on top of that, Reif's lab was broken into. Documentation of his work, including photographs, and even pieces of his microscope were stolen and vandalized. Then, in what would be too much coincidence for even a Hollywood movie, the multi-million-dollar Burnett lab in New Jersey was torched and destroyed just as its scientists were about to corroborate Reif's findings. Police then illegally confiscated the rest of his research, and the story starts to have a whole lot of similarities with Wilhelm Reich, but that's another story for another time. And that was about it. Fishbane would go down in history with a prestigious write-up of his medical career based on exposing quacks Or, alternatively, financial enemies of Big Pharma's chemical and surgery-based medical model. And it wasn't just Fishbane. There was a coordinated effort to ensure that other doctors didn't even attempt to follow in Rife's footsteps. Dr. Cornelius P. Rhodes, an oncologist, Rockefeller Institute alum, and head of the Chemical Warfare Service during the last 2 years of World War II, spent 2 decades from 1939 to 1959 as the head of Memorial Sloan Kettering, the nation's premier chemotherapy advocate, where Rhodes was helping to shape the newly emerging quote-unquote treatment of cancer with chemotherapy. He too prevented other doctors from even attempting to replicate Rife's work, pulling strings to get research funding canceled for those who even dared to try. Rhodes not only prevented Dr. Irene Diller from announcing the discovery of the cancer microorganism to the New York Academy of Sciences in 1950, but he got Dr. Caspi slapped with a nasty IRS investigation and her laboratory funds canceled after she announced a similar discovery in Rome 3 years later in 1953. Rhodes, it should be pointed out, would also go down in history as a potential murderer. In the 1930s, when Rhodes was sent down to Puerto Rico for the Rockefellers' Anemia Commission, he had a drunken night where he returned back to his house to find his car had been vandalized and proceeded to write a disgusting racist confession of both murder and attempted murder by injecting people with cancer to a colleague. He wrote they being Puerto Ricans, are beyond doubt the dirtiest, laziest, most degenerate and thievish race of men ever inhabiting this sphere. It makes you sick to inhabit the same island with them. They are even lower than Italians. What the island needs is not public health work, but a tidal wave or something to totally exterminate the population. It might then be livable. I have done my best to further the process of extermination by killing off 8 and transplanting cancer into several more. The latter has not resulted in any fatalities so far. The matter of consideration for the patient's welfare plays no role here. In fact, all physicians take delight in the abuse and torture of the unfortunate subjects. 13 people died under Rhodes' quote-unquote care in Puerto Rico. And the Rockefeller public relations firm got into full swing, coming out to say that Rhodes was simply writing a fantastic and playful letter for his own amusement, a satire piece, if you will. Because as we all know, when you're just in a playful mood, that's the kind of letter that you write. Token investigations, including one by the Rockefeller Institute, ensued and claimed there was no evidence that Rhodes had abused or neglected his patients. But as far as history is concerned, you can believe Rhodes' letter hasn't been featured too prominently in his otherwise illustrious biography as a chemotherapy pioneer.
To me, the term murderer is much more appropriate.
And today, how many people have needlessly died from cancer that could have quickly, painlessly, inexpensively, and easily been cured by Rife technology in the years since his research was purposefully suppressed? It's a horrifying thought. My mother almost died from cancer. She was diagnosed back in 2007, and they gave her a grueling chemotherapy treatment set that included one she later found out wasn't even for the type of cancer she was diagnosed with. They just threw it in, like a little added bonus. And when all was said and done, and her immune system had been utterly destroyed, but her cancer went into remission, the doctors turned around and informed her that it would probably come back in 5 to 10 years. That is not a cure. The reason the average person still believes dangerous and toxic chemotherapy cures cancer today is the same greedy force behind why most people still fuel their cars with gasoline, despite the fact that much more efficient, inexpensive, and environmentally sound alternatives have existed for decades, but have also been suppressed until recently. Greed, however, can't keep the truth hidden from humanity forever, especially those truths which are so fundamentally obvious, and becoming more obvious by the day. It's 2017. How many years have people been donating money to cancer research and running for the cure without so much as a peep from the allopathic medicine system about the cause? Albeit quietly, we now have researchers coming out of the woodwork left and right to verify the power of resonant frequencies to kill viruses and bacteria and diseases, including cancer. 2 doctors in 2014 published a paper in Global Advances in Health and Medicine titled Life Rhythm as a Symphony of Oscillatory Patterns. Electromagnetic energy and sound vibration modulates gene expression for biological signaling and healing. It's a very interesting paper, and in it they concluded Not only chemicals and physical energies like EMFs and sound vibrations, but even our emotions, thoughts, beliefs, and the way we develop our intentions and life rhythms can deeply transform our gene expression patterning at the cellular level. This finding may disclose unexpected chances to develop self-healing processes based on further utilization of this remarkable human potential. The paradigm emerging here moves from a purely biochemical viewpoint based solely upon physical concepts of energy and momentum transfer and their implications for biochemistry to a holistic information-based paradigm. Much as a whisper might carry more gravitas than shouted words, science may now be uncovering the basic principles of a more subtle informational biology in which specific signaling behaviors can carry the power for healing. We were meant to heal. We were made to heal. We all know how well the big pharma medical model of filling ourselves up with chemicals and ripping out all our vital organs has served us. These aren't cures. It's sick care, not health care. It's only a matter of time before the medical and scientific communities are going to be forced to admit that Rife was right, or they'll risk losing the last few shreds of credibility they even have, if they have any, in a world where it's become all too obvious we've been purposefully held hostage in a technology bubble.
Turn the light on. Oh, yeah, you got it. This is the Rife Research Laboratory in Point Loma. This is Rife, the research scientist of this laboratory. Here are reviews of the Rife Research Laboratory at Point Loma, California. This is narrated by John Crane, the principal scientist in this laboratory was Royal R. Rife, R-I-F-E, who had worked in research on cancer and many other diseases from 1920 to 1942. This is the chemical apparatus of the laboratory, part of it. The cultures are in this cabinet, which had to be protected from the radiation of the electromagnetic energy developed by Rife's ray tube instruments. There were many sterilizers in the laboratory, one being 15 feet long for the sterilization of glassware and other research items. These are hot water steam heaters. There was a complete machine shop in the laboratory for tool work, making microscopes, and providing any of the facilities needed for the research. This research was sponsored by the Rife Virus Microscope Institute, by Life Lab Incorporated, and by the John F. Crane Corporation, set up for continuing Rife's research. Every room was completed in itself. Nothing was taken from one room to another. Rife was a world traveler and a great marksman. He had 40 of the most beautiful guns made in those days. This is Rife's office, his desk. This is the vault where he kept some radium and other valuable materials used in the experiments on cancer. Rife had about 1,000 albino rats in the basement, which he used to grow tumors from a virus he isolated, a cancer virus, which was isolated and injected into the rats. These are steam sterilizers in a sterilization room. This is a surgery room in which the glassware and other surgery items were used in the operations on the rats by Rife. This is the main surgery table where the rats were, or the other animals were operated on. These are pictures of the surgical instruments used by Rife. Rife was assisted by many MDs that worked with him during this research. This is the optical room in which the microscopes and the Leit's optical bench is shown in the background, with his universal microscope, the Rife microscope, published by the Smithsonian Institution and the Franklin Institute. This was one of 5 instruments that Rife designed and built with the help of his colleagues. This is a 1,000,000-volt X-ray. This is a stop-motion photomicrograph machine that was used to make delayed versions of the growing of flowers or the growing of viruses, and growing of plants, the growing of worms, which are all recorded. This is a Ascania research camera, 35mm, that Rife used in his work. This is a number 2 microscope. A virus microscope was a prismatic instrument. And this is a number 3 universal microscope, prismatic type, that embodied all fields of microscopy, including dark field, polarized light, infrared light, ultraviolet light, and monochromatic beam light. The indicator dial moved around 7 times to move the object up and down 1 micron, and it was a very sensitive instrument. The ocular that you see on the left side in the middle of the instrument, when that was plugged in, made it a standard microscope. Now, in isolating cancer virus in 1931, Rife took an ulcerated human breast mass from the Paradise Valley Sanitarium donated by Dr. R.T. Hamer, who was assistant superintendent of the Paradise Valley Sanitarium and Hospital. Portions of this tumor were cut out and filtered through a triple-aught porcelain Berkfeld filter, which gave about 10 micron filtration. The virus could readily pass through a filter of this degree of closeness. The test tubes that are shown here are irradiated for 24 hours with neon argon or krypton gas, in which, like a fluorescent light, the radiation caused the virus to become virulent. Rife could then grow tumors in weeks instead of months in the art without this radiation. The test tubes were placed in a 2-inch water vacuum and irradiated for 24 hours as they progressed up the test tube holder. Everything is flamed to sterilize the bacteria, to sterilize the cotton that held it, and the solutions. Every time one test tube disappears, it means that there's an elapsed time of 24 hours between the radiation of the lights. This shows some of the experimental animals in the basement. Rife had over 1,000 animals, mostly albino rats. The rats were injected with a very tiny needle from the virus that he had filtered and isolated, and the tumors would be allowed to grow to be 2 or 3 grams heavier than the rat. These are some of the rats that you see now. Rife had about 12 men that worked in this laboratory to keep everything spotlessly clean, sterilized. The next picture shows the injecting of the cancer virus in the rat. The mammary gland was used of the rat because it came out of the mammary gland of a human breast mass. The rat was given a partial anesthesia to avoid the shock of the needle, and the virus was injected in the rat. The point of the injection is shown in the forward part of the rat. Rife would then allow the cancer tumors to grow, and there you can see the tumor in the rat. He would surgically remove the tumor and treat the rat with his ray tube instruments, which frequencies would devitalize the cancer virus without harm to the human or the animal cells of the rat. Rife used high-powered glasses for his operations in order to get down to fine details of the removal. The tumor is tied off and cut away, in which the cancer virus can again be isolated from that tumor, and going into other rats with the injections of over 400 times to prove that the virus that he isolated was the cause of the cancer tumor. Now this shows a tumor coming out of triple distilled water, and a portion of that tumor is being cut away so that you can observe the cancer virus under Rife's microscopes. Rife had the only microscopes in the world that could see the cancer virus or any other virus alive, and he studied them for years, which is all recorded in the Polarity Research Manual in the first section called Electron Therapy. Everything that you see is triple distilled. This is triple distilled water going in. He's going to gently grind up the cancer tumor to extract the virus. This is a Berkfeld filter, porcelain filter, similar to Dresden China, unglazed. The liquid material is poured into the test tube, and a drop is removed from that liquid, which Rife will shortly place on a slide which has been sterilized with flame. The liquid material is withdrawn from a micro pipette made by Rife into the solution, and a drop is placed on the slide and covered with a cover slip made of quartz. Rife used quartz slides because the light passed through better than glass. Now the ray tube is above Rife's head, which will be turned on later to kill the virus. The instrument is to the left of Rife, the black instrument, which is a ray tube instrument. It consists of being a transmitter and an audio oscillator in which Rife could tune the frequencies which he knew would kill the virus, just like a voice would crack a glass. Now these are the first pictures ever made of the cancer virus. These cancer materials were motile, streamlined shapes like a fish, which Rife said would travel at speeds of 400 miles per hour if the comparable distance were measured in ordinary air. This is an air bubble coming in from the right-hand side of the slide because the slide was not sealed. Our Rife will now turn on the ray tube instrument, which will activate the light. It'll have a little flash, and that'll be all it is to kill all the virus in the room. It's just on for a few seconds. This ray tube instrument had a capacity of 500 watts, which would transmit this energy 10 to 12 miles in around the whole area. And this shows the virus after it's been treated with the ray tube instruments, which has a resonant frequency that killed the virus, and they're all clumped together, agglutinating in the field. This shows the ray colors, not the colors, but the ray emanations. You'll see the colors pretty soon. The lethal frequencies of the electromagnetic emanations are shown here in these first slides ever made of oscilloscope patterns, which were shown in the Detroit Electronic Convention in 1942. These spikes of these frequencies are primarily the killers of the virus, which actually the internal energy is built up in the virus and they just disintegrate into pieces, so there's no life left to grow again. The various frequencies that can be generated by an audio oscillator are put on a carrier wave in the diathermy range, which range from 13 million cycles per second up to 42 million cycles per second. And this shows the amplification of the signal going into the carrier wave, and the slower frequencies now are being shown, which they can be varied with harmonics and other square wave waveforms that were later found to be much more effective than sine wave or triangular wave or other waveforms that have been tried for years. This is an Abrams oscillator, a deadbeat oscillator that generated the frequencies which you see here for the spikes coming up to kill the cancer virus or any other virus. Worms were also devitalized up to 10 feet long with a few seconds treatment. Rife tested Abrams' deadbeat oscillator and found that it worked also, in addition to his own electromagnetic energy systems. This research has all been suppressed by the American Medical Association, by Morris Fishbein, who also tried to suppress all of the reports and scientific publications from the Rife Research Laboratory. The principal publications of the microscope and of the research on cancer and many other diseases was published by the Smithsonian Institution and by the Franklin Institute in 1944. Copies of this document will be made available for any person wishing to secure one. Rife was demonstrating here that 5 frequencies could be put on the same carrier wave, which was unheard of at that time. The person that benefited from this was a telephone company, and today I understand they're using over 100 frequencies on the same carrier wave. This work was in conjunction with Coolidge of General Electric, who furnished the ray tubes. This is a picture of the interior of the laboratory of John F. Crane in San Diego. Years later, in which the instruments were set up again to do further research from 1950 to the present time. This is an optical bench, Bosch and Lone, for studying the telegraph work and also bacteria work. This is a Leitz optical bench in which the microscope could be put over that. It could be either horizontal or vertical, and was mounted on springs so it would be free of the Earth's shocks. This is a petrographical micropolariscope used by Rife for chemical analysis and for observation of the bacteria and virus, which was transmitted up through the 40-inch bellows of the Leitz optical bench so that photomicrographs could be made of the bacteria and other entities. This is a number 2 microscope. This is a number 4 microscope built by Rife and his assistants. Rife was a great machinist, had a tool and die maker working with him at all times. These are the controls of the instrument. That's a fine adjustment and the coarse adjustment on the top and the back. I'm demonstrating these controls to see them. This instrument was a loop which was wound for the neon or argon or krypton or xenon gases so that the test tubes could provide radiation to get the cancer virus virulent. This is a counter-rotating grizzly prism in which the rays of the light were transmitted up through the instrument to stain the virus with the frequency of light. Now, this is a view of the close-up view of the Rife Universal Microscope, showing the dark field illuminator on the right side, which swung down into position for dark field illumination of syphilis bacteria and other dark field bacteria. Rife researched all of the bacteria, including Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, Streptothrix, leprosy, tuberculosis, gonorrhea, Streptothrix, and many other diseases. The microscope was also used for measuring the angles of crystals in crystallography. As you can see, it can be rotated through 3 planes, and the slide can be moved back and forth, up and down, in and out, and whatever angle that needed to be measured could be measured with a protractor indicator on the back of the microscope at the top, which was also coordinated with the angles of the movements that you just saw. The lights underneath the base of the microscope could be moved back and forth to use different types of light, such as infrared, ultraviolet, monochromatic beam light, and any other light that was desired. The microscope had prisms that went through both sides of it. This is the patented Rife microscope lamp, which took an ordinary automobile 21 candle power bulb and boosted it up to 1200 candle power with the reflector on the bottom, which you see there, and the condenser lens at the top of the unit. This is a Van Leeuwenhoek hanging drop microscope, first developed around 1600 by a Dutchman in Europe, in which you could see large bacteria like paramecium and other units of microorganisms. This is the original research instrument, which changed the ohms from 100,000 ohms to 1,000,000 ohms in steps of 1 ohm to vary the frequencies used in this ray tube, which you're seeing here now. This is the inside of the ray tube, activated by 8,000 volts, in which helium gas was used to cause the radiation to kill the virus of cancer and other viruses. This is a standard X-ray tube converted with the helium gas so that it could be used, and this shows the change in the resonant frequencies to get different intensities of the light. Now we're going back to the original photomicrograph of the cancer virus, and then the new one that I patented, that I copyrighted in 1955 it was. This is a bacteria called typhoid, Bacillus typhosus, in which the bacteria has 3 viruses, one at the bottom, which you see, one at the side, and one at the top. When the polarity is negative in the body, the virus remain in the bacteria, but when it gets too negative, they're compressed and they're extruded from the bacteria. When it's positive, well, they remain in the bacteria and there's no disease. The feelers are shown on the lower right-hand portion of this picture. That's done with a stain that Rife developed to show the feelers. This was a dinner meeting at Dr. Milbank Johnson, MD's home in Pasadena, honoring Rife and Dr. Arthur I. Kendall of Northwestern University Medical School. And this is the 40 doctors that attended that dinner. And they had Dr. Rufus von Kleinsmith, president of USC, was there. And his university was used to sponsor a clinic in 1934 which cured 16 hopeless cancer cases. These pictures were taken after Rife passed away in 1972, showing the universal microscope again. Lower portion of it. That's one of the 6 ray tube instruments that were built by Allied Industries, which I owned. Instruments were built by Kennedy of San Francisco in 1920. This microscope I designed and built for projection of the viruses, bacteria, and worms and so on a slide 10 feet away. It also has a front screen which you can see the rule gratings being projected on the front screen. This projection microscope is available at $10,000 apiece. One of these instruments is used in the Los Angeles area now in research. The digital control on the right, lower right, is for getting back to precision locations, up and down, vertical locations, so that slides can be put in and out and focused very rapidly. Yeah. Okay. They test lens in the center of it, which can see the filament of the light and bring the entire system into focus for projection to a screen 10 foot away. This is a patent drawing, which is upside down, of the microscope, one of the first projection microscopes built, which shows the various optical projection systems. This is an external view of the projection microscope outside on the sidewalk. This is a patent drawing of the projection microscope showing the grizzly prism to the left side, which can focus in the different colors of light so that the viruses can be stained in their own characteristic chemical resonant colors. The internal view of the microscope and the patented Rife lamp below is shown to bring the system up to the top where a movie camera or a other projection system can be used to enlarge the images up to 200,000 times. The eyepiece shown there can be looking into the image and also see it, or it can be seen on a ground glass which covers the top of the instrument, which eliminates empty magnification. This means that everything that's projected up can be seen on the view plate. This is an external view of the first projection microscope, which is now in use here in San Diego by an MD for his own private research. This is a front view of the instrument showing the dial on the left-hand side, which operates two twin jack screws that move the microscope up and down to bring the object into focus. This is a rear view of the same instrument showing the belt that's connecting the two jack screws. Now, this is a test setup on the Leitz optical bench showing the optical system, which can be projected to test out the various optical components. And this is another external view of the projection microscope with a 6-inch barrel, which has locations at the top of the barrel for 3 eyepieces or a camera, which can be inserted, and the images reviewed or seen. This is another patent drawing showing the optical path of the light from the base to the top, which is projected on up by the condenser lenses, the optical oculars, and the eyepieces, or projected on out with a special mirror which goes to a screen 10 foot away. It could also go to a television camera, which would increase the power another 10,000 times. This is a picture again of the Rife Research Virus Microscope to see the cancer virus, TB virus, and many other viruses which Rife recorded in my book called Electron Therapy, which is available for sale in the Polarity Research Manual. This instrument was designed for controlling bacteria in oil and gasoline, in which the U.S. government had about $300 million in storage tanks in several places around the world, which had to be replaced every 3 months. This instrument could kill the bacteria in the fuel so that the replacement would not be necessary. President Nixon reviewed this system and decided for the oil companies that there would never be anything like this ever allowed to be used, so that the citizens of this United States could keep on paying $300 million every quarter. And further details of this will be shown in this next slide, which shows a screen, a stainless steel screen inside of a plastic tube, in which the electrodes were placed in the screen, one in the center of it and one on the outside of it, so that anything passing through that area would be devitalized. This instrument could go up to 100 volts, but only 4 or 5 volts was necessary. The fluid that came from the storage tanks was pumped through this devitalizer and on back into the storage tanks again. Another setup was made to kill the viruses and bacteria in chickens. This was made for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Secretary Butts was the principal secretary at the time, and his research lab was over in Marchfield near Riverside, California. And this system was set up to be used inside the chicken cages. They just slid in, and the wires that you see were made of aluminum. The frequency instrument was in the background to generate frequencies which would be lethal to the viruses that the chickens were being affected with from living in unhealthy conditions. Upon delivery of this unit to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they immediately saw that it was electronic, and after being apprised of that fact, they refused to allow any research to be done because they were working with drugs only on instructions from Secretary Butts. And all of this work in preparing this experiment was in vain by John Crane. The chickens destroyed were destroyed at the rate of about 25,000 a month because of this virus condition. All right, that's it. All right. John Crane showing, and now we will increase this VCR tape to where the bacteria goes disintegrating. Now you can see the disintegration of the bacteria going into pieces. This is killing bacteria without harm to the human cell, without drugs. It's much more efficient to kill the bacteria this way than it is to pollute the whole body with drugs. This is one of many events that we will have on the VCR tape to show how the bacteria is disintegrated and destroyed by the right frequency instrument.
Show us the microscope now, Mr. Crane.
This is the new projection microscope, which will be marketed right now from here on out. This has the control of the illumination, the television camera over it, and the television monitor showing the bacteria before they are disintegrated and afterwards.
The importance of this picture is to find the quickness and the effectiveness of the right frequency instrument. It's only split seconds. The organism is paralyzed and starts disintegrating. We will now see the same organism destroyed. See the rapidness of the frequency? It's immediately paralyzed and it starts disintegrating from within. Now the frequencies have to be particular to that particular organism. The other ones are just swimming around and acting like nothing's happening. But to that particular organism, it just disintegrates it completely. And I don't think it's going to get up and walk away, I guarantee it. Very precise, exact. We will now be shooting same organisms, but with a negative color to find the effects. Again, instantaneously the organism is paralyzed. And then again, just disintegrates. And this particular organism disintegrated from both the top and the bottom half. You can see the one at the bottom is completely disrupted, whereas the one at the top is blew up on both ends. Still a mess though. Again, sometimes the organisms are destroyed so fast it's very hard to catch them alive and then destroy them. And again, the ones around not like the big paramecium. They will be destroyed in a later film. And this, we're trying to catch it in the middle of the, here we go. There we go. That's how quick the right crane frequency instrument works. It's instantaneous. I keep stressing the fact that this is a crane rife instrument. I want to see some of the other groups that claim they have rife instruments do this under a microscope. Any microscope for that matter. In this particular shooting, we're not giving the exact correct frequency, but we're going up and down the ladder of the frequencies to come to the correct frequency to destroy it. Frequencies are being applied, but as you can see, it only takes a precise frequency to destroy it. It's suffering, but it's not dying. Until we come to the precise frequency, will it disrupt. As you can see, we're coming closer to its particular frequency. Still mobile, still moves. I think we're coming, that's about it, yeah. Still moving, but I guess you can agree with me that it's a goner. That's it. We're our destruction of a big paramecium. As soon as we can, there it is, right. A lot of people that watch paramecium being destroyed always ask, kill the small ones. Why don't you kill the small ones? So what we're going to do in this shot, we're going to kill the small ones for you with a different type of frequency. Each individual organism carries its own particular frequency for its particular destruction. As you see, they're agonizing already. Some of them are already paralyzed, while the other ones are still struggling to get out of the way. The organisms are different, frequencies are different, but the end results are the same. First they become paralyzed, and then they disintegrate. Rife proved this through all types of different microorganisms. He studied them for over 20 years. The only man that has ever worked along Rife, and that is still alive, of course, is John Francis Crane. He worked with Rife for 17 years. The reason I say this, a lot of people out there are boasting about how they have Rife frequency machines. They knew a friend of a friend who knew Rife, and so forth and so on. Crane worked with Rife for 17 years. And as you can see, he knew something about what was going on back then. As you notice, most of the organisms are now disintegrated. In some organisms it takes longer than others, but the end result is still the same. So the next time you have somebody come up to you and say, I have a Rife frequency machine, I have the Rife frequency machine, ask them, show me some pictures of work you do under the microscope. I want to see it. After he turns a couple of different colors, then say thanks, but no thanks. I'm sticking with Mr. Crane.